There are certain things that come to mind when you think of Christmas. Trees, lights, presents, Santa, Jesus maybe? And over the years, a number of stories have become indicative with the Christmas season. Stories that we must read or watch every year during this time of year because, well, for whatever reason, they've become a ubiquitous part of the holiday season. And one of the oldest of these stories, aside from the obvious one, is Charles Dickens' novella, A Christmas Carol. The story of an old miser who's visited by three spirits, visits his past, present, and future, and learns the true meaning of Christmas has captured the hearts and souls of Christmas lovers everywhere. No matter how many times or how many ways we hear the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, we never get tired of it. Now, at this point you might be wondering, which version of A Christmas Carol are you going to compare to the book? Literally dozens of visual adaptations have been made of this tale. Movies, plays, musicals, television episodes, even a couple of operas. And Scrooge has been played by hundreds of actors, including George C. Scott, Patrick Stewart, Michael Caine, even Jim Carrey. With so many popular and high-quality versions of this tale out there, it's impossible to pick just one. Or even just two. So, I'm not even gonna try. Instead, I'm looking at several of the best and most popular versions of this tale and having them all collectively represent the visual medium. Specifically, I'll be looking at the Alastair Sim version from the 50s and the George C. Scott version from the 80s, both considered to be definitive versions of this story. And for a more recent perspective, the Patrick Stewart version from 1999 and last year's animated version from Disney and director Robert Zemeckis, starring Jim Carrey. And also, the Muppet version. 'Cause it's awesome. So, without further ado, let's get started with this special holiday edition of Books vs. Movies Review, looking at A Christmas Carol. So, you're really gonna wear the Santa hat? Yes, I'm really gonna wear the Santa hat. Deal with it. Okay. Well, let's start by looking at the icon of everything not being in the Christmas spirit, Ebenezer Scrooge. Yes, even if you have somehow never read the book, watched the movies, or encountered this story in any way, you probably know what it means to be a Scrooge. This old miser is such a penny pincher that in spite of being incredibly rich, he lives in the most squalid of places, spends money only when he absolutely has to, and considers those who celebrate Christmas to be foolish money wasters. But he's also a tortured soul, and events in his life have led him to becoming this cold-hearted, money-grubbing businessman that he is. The character makes the story instantly relatable because we've all known someone like Scrooge, met someone like Scrooge, and even at times, been someone like Scrooge, if only to a degree. As such, it makes sense that so many actors have wanted to take a shot at playing this role. And they all play him a little bit differently. George C. Scott plays up the cold-hearted nature of the character. His version of Scrooge rarely, if ever, gets angry or raises his voice, but you can hear the coldness in his words.
If they would rather die, perhaps they had better do so, and decrease the surplus population.
Surely you don't mean that, sir?
With all my heart. Now, if you will go about your business, gentlemen, and allow me to go about mine.
Patrick Stewart, on the other hand, plays him more as a tortured soul, and we see him frequently get angry and lose his temper.
Damon! It's Scrooge! God!
Away from here!
Michael Caine and Jim Carrey leaned that way too, but they all still managed to find the subtle cold-heartedness in the character as well. Both versions have their merit, and in general, each actor has found something new to explore about the character. And they each add a new level of dimension to what was, in the book, a pretty archetypal character. I especially love Alastair Sim's continued allegations that he wants to change, but he's too old and it won't make any difference.
I cannot change. It is not that I am impenitent. It is just that I...
That's another level of characterization that the book didn't really explore. But the book character does manage to portray both the cold-hearted nature and the tortured soul of the character. And the movie portrayals do have their flaws. Jim Carrey's almost constant anger does get a bit wearing at times. And Alastair Sim and Patrick Stewart both overdo the ending just a bit. But by contrast, George C. Scott is actually a little bit too subtle at the end. You don't really get the sense that it's awkward for him at all to be asking his nephew and his wife for forgiveness for his attitude. Michael Caine has the same problem, although the song sequence at the end could account for that. Also in the book, you really do get a sense of the growth of the character. He goes from resistant with the ghost of Christmas past, resigned with the ghost of Christmas present, and then almost eager with the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And we see him, bit by little bit, find himself again and realize what he's become and where he's headed. But in looking at these 5 performances, there isn't one that doesn't also show us consistent growth of character. Also, if we're going to talk about growth, let's talk about young Scrooge from the past, also an important factor in considering this character. In the book, we're shown 3 main scenes from Scrooge's past. The day that Fan brought him home from school, the party at Fezziwig's, and the day that Belle left him. And that's really it. The book also shows us what happened to Belle after she left Scrooge, but that has less to do with Scrooge and more to do with the life that he could have had. But the movies, almost without exception, always delve deeper into Scrooge's past. The George C. Scott version shows us more of the troubled relationship between Scrooge and his father, and actually makes a connection between him leaving school and him starting his apprenticeship at Fezziwig's. And all of the versions actually set up the relationship with Belle, either showing their first meeting, or showing an early part of their courtship before diving into the breakup scene, something that the book doesn't do. The only movie depiction of Scrooge I'm not crazy about is the Muppet version, which is weird because I like almost everything else about that movie. But this depiction of young Scrooge doesn't really indicate that he was ever better than he is now. We see the child Scrooge speak out against Christmas, and we see the young adult Scrooge berate Fezziwig for spending too much money on his Christmas party. We don't get the sense that Scrooge was ever an innocent or fun-loving young man. He seems the same as a child as he is as an adult. But the failings of this depiction are easily made up in the Alastair Sim version, which has by far the best depiction of the past, going way deeper than the book, and showing us every scene in Scrooge's life that made him into the person that he is in the present. In addition to the basic scenes in the book, we see Scrooge leaving Fezziwig for a better job and eventually forsaking him altogether for the furtherance of his career. Scrooge meeting Marley for the first time and partnering with him to take over the business that they've been clerking for. And we even see him from 7 years previously on the day that Marley died. It's all brilliantly done, and it really intensifies the feeling of regret inherent in this part of the story as we see all of the broken promises in his life and all of the people that he let down. And where the focus of the book seems to be on how Scrooge pushed away the love of his life, in this movie that aspect is downplayed in favor of showing us how Scrooge pushed away everyone in his life. Even his best friend and partner, Marley. And even though all the movies don't go into this much depth, we still get the feeling that we know who this character is and how he got to where he is in the present. For that reason, it's the combined performances of the movies that get the point.